grocery store smelled like floor wax and overripe bananas, the kind of smell that hits you the moment the automatic doors slide open and never quite lets go. It was a Tuesday evening, late enough that most families had already finished dinner, early enough that the fluorescent light still felt cruel against tired eyes. The aisles were half empty, shopping carts drifting slowly like boats without oars, and the checkout lanes hummed with the quiet rhythm of a weeknight that had nothing left to prove. Marcus Dellaway stood near the cereal aisle with his daughter perched on his hip and a handwritten list folded twice in his back pocket. He was 38 years old, with the kind of face that had once been easy to smile and now had to remember how. His work boots were still on. He hadn't had time to change. He almost never had time anymore. His daughter, Iris, was 4. She had her father's dark eyes and her late mother's habit of tilting her head sideways when she was thinking hard about something. Right now she was thinking very hard about a box of cereal with a cartoon toucan on the front. "Can we get this one, Daddy? We have cereal at home, baby. But this one has the bird." Marcus looked at the price. He looked at the list. He looked at the $43 in his wallet and mentally subtracted the gas he still needed, the copay he owed the clinic from last month, the bag of dog food for their neighbor's dog that he had accidentally promised to pick up. He put the cereal back. "Next time," he said, and Iris accepted this the way small children accept almost everything their fathers say, not fully believing it, but willing to let it go for now. He had been doing this math in his head every single day for the past 14 months. Ever since Karen died. Ever since the hospital bills arrived in thick envelopes that he started leaving unopened on the kitchen counter because opening them felt like choosing which part of his life to lose. Ever since he went from being a man with a plan to being a man who was just trying to get through the week. He wasn't looking for pity. He had never been that kind of person. He had grown up in a house where you fix things quietly and didn't make other people carry your weight. His father had taught him that. His grandfather before that. So Marcus Dellaway's carried his weight, and Iris's weight, and the weight of everything Karen had left behind, and he did it without complaint, even on the days when the weight felt like it was folding him in half. Tonight he needed milk, bread, a rotisserie chicken if it was on sale, and a bag of apples. He was going to stretch the chicken into 3 meals. He had gotten good at that. He turned the cart toward the deli section, and that was when he saw her. She was standing at the far end of the aisle, near the prepared foods, a woman in a gray coat that was slightly too large for her frame. She was maybe 60, maybe older, with silver hair pinned back loosely and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. Her name, though Marcus had no way of knowing it yet, was Harriet Odom, and she had been standing in that same spot for nearly 4 minutes, staring at a roasted chicken behind the glass like it had said something unkind to her. She wasn't looking at the price tag. She was looking at the chicken itself, the way a person looks at something they want very badly but have already decided they cannot have. Marcus almost kept walking. He almost pushed the cart past and found his own chicken and went home and cooked dinner and put Iris to bed, and none of what happened next would have happened at all. But Iris turned her head sideways. "Daddy," she said softly, "that lady is sad." Children say things like this sometimes, simple and exact, the way adults have forgotten how to be. Marcus stopped the cart. He looked at the woman again. Harriet had not moved. Her hand was resting on the edge of the glass case but not quite touching it, hovering just above the surface, and there was something in that gesture, the almost reaching, the not quite allowing herself, that Marcus recognized in his bones. He had made that gesture himself, many times, in many stores, standing in front of things he needed and telling his hand to put them back. He parked the cart and walked toward her, Iris still on his hip. "Excuse me," he said quietly. Harriet turned. Up close she had kind eyes, the watery blue of late afternoon sky, but they were carrying something heavy. She smiled quickly, the practiced smile of someone who had learned to look fine for strangers. "Sorry, am I in your way?" "No," Marcus said, are you okay?" The practiced smile flickered. "Oh, I'm fine," she said, and then, almost immediately, she stopped. Something in his voice, maybe, or the way he was looking at her. Not with pity. Just with recognition. "It's silly," she said. "I had a longer day than I planned. I was going to get one of these for dinner, and then I checked my account and—" She stopped again. Shook her head. "It's silly, I'll figure something out." Marcus looked at the chickens. They were $9.49 each. He looked at the $43 in his wallet. He did the math again, different math this time. Gas could wait until Thursday. The clinic copay wasn't going anywhere. The dog food, well, the dog food was a problem for later. "We were just about to get one of these," he said. "Can I get one for you too?" Harriet blinked at him. "Oh no, 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 I couldn't." "It's not a big thing," Marcus said, and he meant it. Not because $9 was nothing to him, because it wasn't, but because the woman in front of him was doing the same math he did every day, and he knew exactly how exhausting that math was, and tonight he had just enough to make it stop for one more person. Harriet looked at him, at Iris, at him again. "I'm Margaret Odom," she said, as if introducing herself was the right thing to do before accepting kindness from a stranger. "Marcus," he said, "and this is Iris." Iris tilted her head sideways. "You have pretty glasses," she said. Something in Harriet's face changed, not the practiced smile, something underneath it, older and softer, the face she had before the long day, before whatever had happened to bring her here to stand in front of a glass case and almost reach but not quite allow herself. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said. Marcus ordered 2 chickens. While they waited, he asked her simple things. Where she lived, a few miles north, she said, in the house she and her husband had bought decades ago, before her husband passed, before the pension got complicated, before the furnace broke last winter and she spent 3 months being cold rather than ask her son for money because her son had his own troubles and she didn't want to be one of them. She didn't say all of that, not in those words, but Marcus heard it anyway, in the spaces between what she did say, the way you hear a whole song from just the first few bars. She asked him about Iris. He told her the short version, single dad, doing his best. She did not press for more. She seemed to understand that some stories are long and not everyone has the energy to tell them in a grocery store on a Tuesday night. The counter worker handed them each a chicken in a warm plastic bag. "Thank you," Harriet said to Marcus. Her voice was different now, steadier. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Marcus said. "That's kind of the point." She laughed a little, a real laugh, small and sudden like something she had forgotten she still had. They walked toward the checkout lanes together, not quite side by side, not quite strangers anymore either. Marcus paid for his groceries, the milk, the bread, the apples, the 2 chickens, and watched the total on the screen and felt the familiar arithmetic tighten in his chest, but he also felt something else beside it. Something that didn't have a name exactly but sat warm and quiet like the first sip of coffee on a cold morning. Harriet was in the next lane over. He noticed her fumbling in her purse, and for a moment he thought she was going to be short again, but she pulled out an old coin purse, the kind with a metal clasp, and counted out her items carefully, and managed, and he watched her exhale when the total came out okay. At the exit, she turned to him. "Marcus," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you live nearby?" He told her the street. She nodded slowly. "I used to have a garden," she said, "but my knees aren't what they were. I have more zucchini than I know what to do with. If I left a bag on your porch sometime, would that be all right?" He smiled, the kind of smile that takes a moment to arrive but means more when it does. "That would be more than all right," he said. They parted in the parking lot, walking in opposite directions, the warm bags in their hands, the cold air coming down over everything. Marcus buckled Iris into her car seat. She was already half asleep, her head tipping toward the window, her small hands loose in her lap. He started the car and sat for a moment before pulling out, the way he sometimes did, not because he needed to think but because he needed to feel where he was before he started moving again. He thought about Karen. He thought about how she used to say that kindness was the only thing you could give away and end up with more of. He had thought that was the kind of thing people said without really meaning, the way people say the weather is lovely when they want to fill a silence. But he was beginning to understand that she had meant it. That maybe she had always known something he was only now catching up to. Iris made a soft sound in her sleep. Marcus pulled out of the parking lot and drove home through the dark. Harriet Odom set her chicken on the kitchen counter and stood in the quiet of her house for a long moment. It was a good quiet, mostly, the kind that houses hold on to after decades of being lived in. There were photos on the wall she didn't have to look at to see. Wendell on their wedding day, the kids at various ages, a trip to the coast in the late 90s when everything was easier, the kind of life that had been full, genuinely full, and now felt like a coat that was still warm but missing certain buttons. She was not a woman who cried easily. She had outlasted harder things than a long day and a thin account balance. But as she stood at her kitchen counter and pulled the chicken out of its bag and smelled the warmth of it, she found herself pressing one hand flat on the counter and just breathing. A stranger. A man who couldn't have had much more than she did, probably less, with a little girl on his hip and work boots still on at 7 in the evening. And he had looked at her, not past her, not through her, not with the absent politeness she had come to expect from people 20 years younger who had somewhere to be. He had actually looked at her, like she was a person in a difficult moment, like that was worth stopping for. She fixed herself a plate, ate at the kitchen table instead of in front of the television, which she had started doing more often than she liked to admit. She looked at the empty chair across from her, and it felt, just for a moment, a little less empty than usual. She thought about the little girl with the tilted head who had said her glasses were pretty. She thought about what it would take for a child that young to notice that an adult was sad. And she thought about the father who had listened when his 4-year-old told him to stop. Before she went to bed, she went out to the garden with a flashlight and picked the best zucchini she had. She put them in a paper bag and set them by the front door. She didn't know which house on Marcus's street. She would figure it out tomorrow. 3 days later, Marcus came home from work to find a paper bag on his porch. Inside were 6 zucchini, a jar of homemade jam with a handwritten label that said Harriet's Strawberry, 2025, and a folded note. He opened the note standing right there on the porch, the door not yet unlocked, Iris's small hand warm in his. For a man who does the math differently than most. Thank you, Icho. He read it twice. He didn't know how she'd found the house. He didn't need to know. He folded the note and put it in his jacket pocket and unlocked the door. That night he made zucchini fritters for the first time in his life, following a recipe on his phone, flour everywhere, Iris sitting on the counter and stealing shreds of cheese. They were not perfect. They were a little too flat and slightly undercooked in the middle, and Iris declared them pretty good, with the confidence of someone who would eat almost anything. Marcus ate 3 of them and thought they were the best thing he had cooked in months. He kept the jam for a week before opening it, saving it the way he used to save good things, back when there were good things worth saving for. And then one Sunday morning, for no reason except that Iris had slept in and the kitchen was quiet and the sun came through the window at the right angle, he opened the jar and spread it on 2 pieces of toast and set one in front of his daughter and sat down across from her. Iris took a bite. Her eyes went wide. "Daddy," she said very seriously, "this is the best thing." He tasted his. Sweet and a little tart, the kind of jam that tasted like someone had made it carefully, with patience, in a kitchen that knew how to hold warmth. "Yeah," he said, "it really is." Iris tilted her head sideways, the way she always did. "Can we send the lady something back?" Marcus thought about this. He thought about $43 in zucchini and a man his grandfather's age who had once told him that kindness wasn't a transaction, it was a current, and you put yourself in it and let it move you wherever it needed you to go. "Yeah, baby," he said. "We can." He didn't know yet what it would be. But he knew it would be something. And he knew that was enough to start. Sometimes the people who have the least to give are the ones who understand best why giving matters. Not because life has been generous to them, because they know exactly what it costs to go without, and they would rather go without a little more than let someone else stand at a glass case and almost reach but never quite allow themselves. That is not a grand gesture. It doesn't make the news. It doesn't ask for anything in return. It is just a man with $43 and a tired face and a little girl who noticed that a stranger was sad, stopping, when it would have been so much easier to keep walking. I keep thinking about that moment when Iris tilted her head sideways and said, "Daddy, that lady is sad." 4 years old. She hadn't learned yet to look away from other people's pain. She hadn't been taught to mind her own business or keep moving because there's always somewhere else to be. She just saw what was there and said it out loud, the way children do before the world trains that instinct out of them. Marcus could have kept walking. That's the part that stays with me. He had $43, a list in his back pocket, and a daughter on his hip. He was not a man with extra. He was a man doing the math every single day just to stay above water, and yet when he stopped and looked at Harriet, really looked, he didn't see a stranger at a deli counter. He saw the gesture. The almost reaching. The hand that hovers just above the thing you need because you've already told yourself you can't have it. He recognized it because he had made that same gesture himself, more times than he would ever say out loud. That recognition is what I think people miss when they talk about kindness like it's something the fortunate hand down to the struggling. It isn't. The people who understand what it costs to go without are often the ones most willing to give. Not because they have more, because they know exactly what that particular kind of quiet defeat feels like, and they would rather stretch their own limits than watch someone else stand inside it alone. What Marcus did took something real. Not money, though $9 mattered, genuinely mattered, given where he was. It took the willingness to act on what he knew instead of walking past it. That's a kind of moral clarity that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wait for a convenient moment or a comfortable margin. It just does the right thing in the middle of a hard week, in a fluorescent-lit grocery store, while tired and behind on bills. And Harriet, she didn't make it easy to help her. She had the practice smile, The "I'm fine." The instinct to deflect because accepting kindness from a stranger requires a different kind of courage than most people talk about. It asks you to be seen in your difficulty, to let someone stop for you when you've spent years being the one who holds things together. That takes its own form of quiet strength, the kind that doesn't get celebrated but is real nonetheless. What I find myself turning over is this: Marcus went home that night a little lighter. Not because his situation changed. The bills were still there. The copay, the gas, the long math of being a single parent, none of it disappeared. But something in him shifted, like he had remembered, for a moment, that he was still a man capable of choosing something beyond survival. That matters more than it sounds. We talk a lot about resilience like it means pushing through alone. But sometimes resilience looks like a jar of homemade strawberry jam left on a porch. It looks like a little girl who still knows how to notice. It looks like stopping when everything in you says keep going, because someone else's hand is almost touching something they need and not quite letting themselves have it. That's the thing Iris understood before she had words for it. And maybe that's the whole lesson right there.